Our question today comes from Mary, who identifies as a submissive and is reflecting on how the act of kneeling in front of her husband is cathartic. Whenever she's feeling overwhelmed or stressed, kneeling before her husband is really great for clearing her head. If she feels she has something she really wants to talk about, she'll kneel while her husband sits on the sofa and strokes her hair or holds her hand. This act has the effect of helping her think more clearly and has a calming effect. What precisely is going on during an experience like this?
Quite a lot, really. These are rituals, right? These are symbols. And the unconscious speaks in the language of symbology. That's why we see the archetypes manifest in myths and stories, because there are symbols and analogies being used to represent these unconscious, what Jung called complexes or archetypes. Kneeling is a very powerful symbol. Knights kneel to kings to pledge their allegiance and fealty, right? Kneeling to someone puts you in a fundamentally more vulnerable position relative to them. It is very similar in many ways to two bears fighting and one of them rolls over and shows its belly. It's giving up competition. It is a symbol that I am not in a fight here. I am submitting. I accept your dominance. I accept the hierarchy here. Doing it voluntarily is a ritual. It's a ritualized communication of the mutual roles that we have. And by putting herself in that headspace, it can be very clarifying, because now I know where I belong. Now I know what my role is, and I can think clearly about how I should act, what I should do, how I should consider things. Whereas if I'm busy being mom, or I'm busy out working, or those are other roles, and then I come in and things are confused. What should I do? How should I act? Which variant of Mary am I? Whereas when she's kneeling, she is Mary the woman, Mary the wife. And that can be incredibly clarifying for parsing through issues. The reason it's clarifying, and this is important as well, is that she has taken that role in her own mental hierarchy as the most important. I suspect that she considers Mary the wife to be more important than Mary the employee, than even probably Mary the mother if she's a mother. She finds that role to be her top hierarchical role among all the roles she has to play in life. And as a result, when she sinks into it, her entire psyche clarifies, because she is back in the alignment that she has chosen for herself, and is now able to think clearly through the rest of her roles, because she's in the one that's at the top of that hierarchy.
You could argue that she is symbolically integrating or returning back home. And that is what has a calming effect. It's that whole sense of getting to a more whole self. And as you said, the symbology of kneeling symbolizes almost like a prayer, if you really think about it.
Very much, almost exactly like a prayer, actually.
Symbolizes, again, like you said, the reconnection with the deepest part of her identity. So I think that's a great insight.
And this is why kink is spiritual. People maybe don't realize that from the outside. People who are not explicitly kinky or haven't really been kinky find it maybe a bit surprising that so many kinky people feel that it is an active spiritual engagement. And yet it's very common from within kink to consider it an active spiritual engagement. And it is for this reason, is that it aligns you with yourself. It allows you to make yourself make sense in the context that you have chosen. And so she probably just feels like, oh, Mary makes sense again, because I'm back in alignment with my values, with my responsibilities that I've chosen, with my desires. All of those things are now framed correctly instead of being jumbled up. And then thinking through things becomes easier. She's calmer because there's a linear path of thought. She's not, one way of thinking about anxiety on some level is, and it's not all of anxiety, but a significant part of anxiety, is not knowing what to pay attention to because I don't have a clear lens to look at things through, So by providing a lens through which to look, now I know what to pay attention to and what to ignore. And I can ignore 99% of reality because I know which 1% is important.
This would be a pretty good time to, I think, remind some of our listeners about one of the goals that we're trying to achieve with this podcast, which is to bring kink out of the, not, I wouldn't say shadows, but this idea that the general public has of kink as some kind of funny or weird or that thing that strange people do. And I think we're trying to give it a greater philosophical foundation or even a psychological foundation and normalizing it in ways where we're not giggling or laughing about the subject. A lot of the podcasts or videos you see about kink, there's this sort of wink, isn't this fun to talk about? Most of the stuff goes towards what kind of whips and chains or what kind of implements you might use. And there's very little discussion really about what's going on underneath the surface of that. And this is a perfect question that sort of recovers the deeper meaning behind a kink symbol. Right, because spanking somebody is a symbol of something as well.
Absolutely.
And when you say spanking, immediately people would start twittering and like, oh, isn't that funny? Hee hee ha ha. Now, that did not occur when someone says, well, I like kneeling in front of my husband. Why is it that caused me so much? So we're able to have perhaps a more sober conversation in this particular example. But really, this is really relevant to all symbolic acts that are involved in kink. The whole thing is a ritualized symbology and enacted analogy.
That is very much what kink is. And that's so important to emphasize, is that kink very much is an enacted symbology and ritualized. And spanking, exactly right. Every sub I've ever played with has felt calmer after being spanked. That's a routine, normalized experience that is remarkably consistent because of the symbology, is that it is an acceptance of authority, an acceptance of another person's right to do this to you. That is inherently framing of that hierarchy. And if that is how you are oriented, then not only does that make sense, you make sense.